I'm Matt Dillahunty, and you're watching Atheist Edge.
Hello, welcome to Atheist Edge. I'm Courtney here with TJ. It's like my annoying little brother. This man, he's funny. As we were saying a minute ago, I do have my apple teeny ready.
We're ready. Cock, lock, and ready to rock.
We don't have any popcorn or anything, but this is a segment about movies.
This is another movie segment.
Specifically, atheism, like directly pertaining to the movie, or just sort of
tangential too, maybe.
Yeah, tangential. That's a good word. Yeah. So atheism pertaining to it in some way, at least in my opinion. So the first one is probably the most controversial and the most fun. Is Sausage Party. Have you seen that?
I have. That was Seth Rogen's little animated project that he did that was very funny.
It's filthy, awful, amazing. But it's just so much fun. And so, you know, it has a lot of clever things, like character arc things. But I think the best part of that is the conclusion of it, of the ending, where you have like the cookbook where it sort of shows for sure like what's happening.
Yeah.
And they sort of reveal, well, we perpetuated this story because it's a nice story and it makes everybody calm and it makes them not afraid of the end of dying. And so the whole movie, it's kind of about like, well, life is fucking cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah, life is really cruel, but at the same time, like, you know, it's good, it's helpful to know the truth and to try and, you know, do what you can with the life that you have. And that's sort of the message of the movie.
Yeah.
And have a lot of wild sex. That's what
right, yeah, because that's an important part too. Let's not get that twisted. I took away pretty much the same thing because, like, my take has always been that, you know, I think it does a good job of describing how I kind of feel about the situation. It's like, you know what, I'm not necessarily afraid of dying, but or afraid of being dead, rather, but the process of dying is something I'm not looking forward to.
Yeah, I've said that before too. Like, it is scary, the idea of like something that might hurt or whatever,
exactly.
but you weren't alive before you were born, and you didn't remember that, so it doesn't really affect you at all.
Yeah.
But what's great about it is it's sort of like it talks about the usefulness and the necessity of knowledge and truth being perpetuated instead of just a nice idea, because it does keep these people sort of not fighting back in a circumstance that isn't helpful, kind of like, you know, the caste system or lots of other religious circumstances.
Keeps them docile while they meet a fate that they don't really understand or don't know is going to happen to them.
Cults and like Mormon church and all these things, that Scientology, these kind of circumstances where people are kept in a certain place that's a harm to them, based on this fairy tale idea that's supposed to, quote unquote, be a nice idea that makes you less afraid of death or have some sort of meaning to your life, or, you know, have a moral code and all these things.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that I really like about Sausage Party was the idea of like having the correct way of perpetuating this idea, like.
Or the roles that were sometimes like forced into.
Well,
really.
Like there's a scene where the main character sort of just calls everybody idiots, and he like gets really angry, and it's sort of like the classic angry atheist online kind of, you know, belligerent person,
like that red pill rage or something,
who's just like really angry and not recognizing the strength of that belief that person holds, and the role that it plays in their life that can be very important. So you kind of have to be sensitive to the emotions of people when you're engaging with people who believe in these things.
Well, I thought
Sausage Party.
All right.
Okay.
Do it.
There's only 4 movies I've walked out of the movie theater.
And that was one of them?
Yeah, dude. How are you guys even... This was a shit movie. The other 3 were...
Did you not hear what I had to say about it?
It definitely had an agenda. I mean, the movie definitely had an agenda. I mean...
The other 3 were Daylight...
But I knew that.
Daylight with Sylvester Stallone, Cool World with either Brendan Fraser or
Fraser
or Brad Pitt. I forget which one. It was like live action and animated.
Yeah, it had animated stuff in it. Yeah.
And the other Hostel, that Quentin Tarantino.
We're not talking about those. We're talking about Sausage Party.
Sorry,
but we're not.
There were some valuable lessons.
Jim didn't care for the film. Okay.
Now it is disturbing as fuck. Like you have like, you know, the woes from the perspective of a condom and what they've been through. Like, it's awful.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, there's some stuff.
It's very crude and, you know, it's very gruesome, but it's got like a piece of gum in a wheelchair that's supposed to be Stephen Hawking. Like, it's so badass. And so the final thing that I would like to say about this is, in the very end, they have this very like visceral, raunchy orgy between a whole bunch of different food products, which are the main characters of the movie. And it's really funny. It's really like disturbing and strange, and it's awkward to sit in the theater with. But it's really funny, and I think the moral of that.
Is this a movie about food in a grocery store
Yes.
trying to escape the grocery store?
Food in the
Sort
grocery
of,
store trying
sort
to
of.
escape.
Shit, wasn't it?
I saw part
Yeah,
of that.
Oh. Well, all the stuff that pertains to atheism and like the value of knowledge and all of that is really at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Some of the disturbing stuff is toward the beginning.
Well, it's
Yeah.
there.
But it's so good. I loved every minute of this movie. It was really funny.
Sophomoric, juvenile.
It is.
It was. I mean,
It's
it was
Seth
dick and
Rogen.
fart. It was dick and fart jokes, but it was
It
pretty.
is.
It was pretty
It's
funny.
Seth
though.
Rogen. It's really.
Just the name Sausage Party. Why the fuck would anybody go see a movie called Sausage Party?
I know, but it's so good. It's on Netflix, so if you're curious, go watch it.
Or don't.
So the thing I wanted to say about the
mixed
end
bag.
with the explicit sexual things in the movie, I really did appreciate that, like, they do separate the idea of there being like a moral consequence to sexual activity and diversity and all of these things, because there's such a narrative around sexual behavior as being tied to morality, and so I liked what they did with that too.
All right.
On the other hand, it does sort of paint the atheist perspective as being
Well,
grossly sexually heathenistic, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's reality, so it's fine.
yeah.
Next is The Martian. I included this. It doesn't explicitly talk about atheism, neither does Sausage Party, but I wanted to talk about it because it's definitely advocating for, you know, the shit's gonna hit the fan and there's nobody to save you and you have to just figure it out, and science can definitely help with that. And that's what I really like The Martian for. There's never a point where like there's a stroke of luck. Everything, like whatever can bad happen will happen, and he just sort of has to figure it out, and that's kind of the human experience.
Yeah, serendipity plays zero role in this guy's situation at all. It's kind of like he has to basically rely on expertise in things to solve problems. He doesn't get to. There's no appealing to any other kind of force that affects him that he can rely on to get through these issues or these obstacles that are put in his way. He's deserted out there, and he's forced to, you know, kind of come up with the solutions on his own. And it's kind of it does a good job of showing how that's the better path to take through life than to rely on other outside forces.
To quote science the shit out of this.
Whoop.
I just spilled my drink. Okay, so
Be careful.
The other thing that I really liked about this movie is there isn't a point. A lot of movies, especially American movies, have this point where like they kind of appeal to this religious belief, where they're just like, oh, you know, isn't there sometimes where you just think, oh, there's so much we don't know, or isn't there sometimes where like stuff happens and we can't explain it? Like, people talk about this as if it's the way the real world works, and it only works that way if you think it does. You know, you're going to see what you're looking for. So what I really liked about this movie is there's not really a point where anybody's like, oh, well, maybe God will help, you know?
Yeah.
And there's never a point where they kind of appeal to that in any way. And a lot of movies do that, especially when you're dealing with life and death situations. It's very popular to unnecessarily enter this into the equation, and so I really liked that The Martian didn't do that.
Yeah, I felt like that there were not many tropes used in the film, so it just kind of addressed things on face value.
Yeah. So next is Spotlight, which is another one where like fucking crazy shit's gonna happen, and there's not a God to protect us from it, so we just have to figure out how to hold people accountable and protect children.
That's the Catholic Church scandal.
Spotlight is about the people from the Boston Globe publishing.
Broke open that story.
Publishing multiple newspaper articles about local Boston priests who were abusing children and being carted around different parishes and and just hidden from the law explicitly.
Yeah.
So the truth of the things that this organization has done to not only perpetuate the abusing of children, but to
Hide the offenders.
yes, and I think the worst offense of that is just carting them around. And actually, side note, there was I rewatched the debate that Stephen Fry and Christopher Hitchens did against the Catholic Church.
Is the Catholic Church a force for good? Yeah.
Yeah, in the world.
And they took the con side.
Yes. So what was nice about that is they did mention, like, you're supposed to be a moral authority.
Yeah.
But apart from that, you know, they talked about why hasn't the church done anything if it's supposed to be a moral authority?
Right.
And Ann Whitcomb, who's defending the Catholic Church, is like, oh, well, there was a point where we didn't know that pedophiles were like repeat offenders, that like if you were accused of this or if you did this, that you were just going to keep doing this. And for one, fuck off, lady. You know,
First, fuck you.
get these people away from children. It's just common sense. Like, even if you don't know that they're ever going to do it again, just stop
Yeah.
it. But apart from that, you're supposed to be a moral authority that has like divine intervention influence, that has divine knowledge.
Yeah.
So what good are you if you're supposed to be a moral authority and you can't catch up to the modern times of science? This just pissed me off.
Yeah. Well.
Well, the nice thing about these priests being moved around to different neighborhoods all the time is that they get to recycle their era.
Yeah.
Recycle what?
They get to meet new people,
Yeah.
and I mean MEAT.
That was a pun, Chris. He knows.
And there are,
This guy knows.
It's so well documented. The thing that makes me so mad is just, you know, this goes back a very long time, and there's been a very long time where the average person would have known better way before this, and it's still happening today. Like, there are people who
Yeah.
are still fugitives from justice and still being perpetuated around different parishes.
Well, I think.
Somebody in the founding fathers, somebody in the 1700s, made a comment about how the Catholic Church was like famously failing to take care of orphan children in their care. So it was already known then.
Yeah.
It'd
Yeah.
be great. It'd be great to have like an omnipresent being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If only there was.
Like,
A moral authority.
Yeah. If only there was an entity out there.
An absolute morality.
Yeah, an absolute morality
this
out
is
there.
not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these people are now no longer with us.
Definitely a a reminder about how dangerous sexual repression is.
Yeah.
So
So annoying. But I hate the hypocrisy that's so blatant. That's just like, oh, we're not going to apologize for what our church has done. We're just going to give excuses as if we didn't know any better at the time. Like, you have to judge the Catholic Church of the circumstances of the time. No. You're
Well-
claiming to be a moral authority that tells the rest of the world what to do.
I mean, how many
Shut the fuck up.
hundreds of years did it take him to apologize for killing Galileo? I mean,
500.
500, right? So we probably got to.
Technically, they didn't kill it.
And to apologize
They
for
exiled
any
them.
number of things.
Yeah,
Yep. Pope Francis.
yeah.
They still hold against the use of condoms in Africa. Like, fuck off. You're
Yeah.
killing people. It sucks.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So
Humanists, come to Africa.
yeah,
Help
if you
us
think
out.
you got it bad, sipping your latte and raging on Twitter, just go to Africa.
Aaron Ra has volunteered to go to Africa.
No, I actually am going out
I heard, yeah.
in February.
Literally.
Oh,
in
shit.
February. Okay.
I'm in Mali and Senegal.
Next movie is this movie called Silence. I was excited to see this movie because it claimed to be all about like religious doubt. And it didn't quite do that. So the premise is Liam Neeson is a what do you call it? It's a
Does
J
he play
word,
a father in this? Because I mean, he plays a father.
Yes.
something like that. Not an actual
Revenge
father.
on somebody.
No.
Will he find us and
so
kill us?
it takes place in a time in Japan's history when
Oh.
Christianity was outlawed, and I forget the name of these people. Jesuit.
Liam Neeson's?
Liam Neeson
Liam
plays
Neeson's.
Liam Neeson plays a persecuted Jesuit who comes to Japan to spread the word of God, and he gets tortured and like turned against that. But the movie is about these two characters who are also Jesuits who go to rescue him and to spread the gospel. And it's very strange because the nation sort of outlaws Christianity and forces people to show their opposition to Christianity by like stepping on a figure of Jesus, like a little
An effigy or something,
wooden
yeah.
plate with Jesus' face on it.
Oh.
And so basically to like denounce your faith, and to people who really believe this stuff, that's a very serious thing because God sees everything. So so there are people who refuse, and there are people who are like tortured and killed for it. But the movie is about this trial of faith. So I went to this movie. I went to the theaters, and it seemed like it was going to be about these like legitimate tests of faith. But what it really is this guy has a faith, and these people try to persecute him and torture him out of that faith. Mm-hmm. And that's not the same thing as having a crisis of faith.
Right.
But by the end of it, he denounces his faith. He like works to catch other Christians throughout his life. But at the very end of the movie, he dies, and he's in this little like box that's being burned with his body. And in his hand, it zooms into his hand, and he has a little cross in his hand. So he's supposed to have converted to Buddhism instead. And he never does, basically. He doesn't in his heart. But he's still like, for his entire life, the rest of his life, he persecutes other Christians and like lives as a non-Christian person. And that's like, I think was Scorsese directed it, and it was sort of about his personal battle with faith. But it's really not like a crisis of faith of like, oh, I've learned all this stuff about the history of the Bible and I'm having a crisis of faith. It's more like I'm having these people torture and kill people around me to try and denounce my faith, but I'm still going to believe it because you're just a martyr at that point. Like, that's not going to make you stop believing.
Yeah.
So it's not really about a crisis of faith, but I thought that was a really interesting movie. And I was kind of disappointed with what it advertised itself to be, because it's not exactly a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's not one that personally I've seen, so I'm just kind of going off your description of it, and off your description of it, it sounds like it'd be like something that you would look at like in a trailer or something and be like, oh, hey, maybe this is something I'd be interested in. But then when the actual experience of sitting through the film, you're kind of left with this like, what did I just watch?
Yes.
Kind of like, I thought this was going to be about something like dealing with non-belief or disbelief or something like that. But all it turned into was look how the poor Christians were persecuted. And so.
Well, and this is based on an actual point in history where people were persecuted for their Christian faith and converted to Buddhism by force by the nation. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's a real thing, but I think the only way it would be a crisis of faith in like an atheist perspective is if it were a metaphor, if the persecution of these people were a metaphor for like facts
the cognitive dissonance that you're feeling in your head,
because that's
when
torturous.
when you're confronted with facts about things in the world, and you start to go, this is really hard because I'm having this. but
it still ends with the conclusion that you don't have to give up your faith at any point, even though you've been through all this stuff. Like, it's really.
Like you were waiting.
I did not like the movie.
I was about to say, you were like waiting for the payoff and waiting for the payoff and waiting and waiting and waiting, and it just never came.
Yes.
Yeah.
It made me very sad. I was like, oh, this is.
That's how this ends?
Obviously, Scorsese's still religious, I guess. Yeah. Like, that's kind of the conclusion of the movie, and I don't know. It was very disappointing for my little atheist heart. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So next one is Paul.
This movie I have seen.
I love this movie. You have seen?
I have seen Paul.
It's amazing.
It's a great movie.
It's very fun.
It's
oh, you'd love it.
Yeah, it's these two guys. They're Englishmen, and it's a Simon Pegg movie. And it's these two Star Wars fanatics. And they're traveling cross country to go to a convention.
To go to a Comic-Con.
They're going to Comic-Con, and
but they're alien fanatics. So what they want to do is go to Comic-Con, and they also want to rent an RV and tour on road trip all the spots that are supposedly like
Roswell
spots that,
and all that kind of
spots
stuff.
that aliens have been spotted in America. And it's really funny. So what the premise of it is that they go on this road trip to like go and be tourists and see the sights of like Area 51 and stuff. And they actually come in contact with an actual alien who's escaped from like a government lab.
Who's played by Seth Rogen.
Yes.
By the way.
And it's really, really fun. And one of my favorite parts that's like about atheism specifically, not only is it challenging this like Christian narrative of like everything in the Bible, but what's nice about it is that there's a point where multiple characters sort of completely reject the idea that this alien exists and the claims that he's making, and they say they start like shouting scripture at him like certain fundamentalist awful people do. And what's nice is Kristen Wiig,
Yeah.
she has this scene where she sort of like is shouting and like praying and just completely rejecting the presence of this alien, and he puts his hand on her forehead and she basically like receives through his powers like all the knowledge of the universe. And it's really fun because she just sort of like pauses and she's like, oh, and then she just faints. It's so great. But what's nice is she becomes an advocate for this stuff.
Yeah, it is a Nick Frost and Simon Pegg
That's
movie.
like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where Zaphod Beeblebrox gets condemned to a closet where he's exposed to all the universe, the enormity of it, right? And he comes out, and everyone's supposed to usually die, and he's so stupid that he just comes out and goes, "Hey, that was cool."
Was that in the was that in the TV series though?
The book.
Or it was just in the book. It wasn't, because that was a radio series before he ever wrote the book though. Yeah.
So this movie is part of a series of movies done by these people like Shaun of the Dead and
Hot Fuzz and
Hot Fuzz.
So this is,
but this of those series, Hot Fuzz is amazing. But my favorite is Paul because I'm atheist and I'm biased.
And it's
it's really, really fun. But yeah, it's a great example not only of like there's more to the universe than this tiny narrative of Christianity, and then also like the freedom of knowledge and what that does. And so she goes through this like process of learning all this stuff, and then she's like, oh, I'm like free. I can like cuss and I can like fornicate, and it's just like so many things that she just like opens her world up to, and it's really, really fun. It's a fun movie for that. I'm just gonna use my little finger.
And this is part 2 to a series. So if you go back and look at part 1 of At the Movies with TJ and Courtney, erroneously in the thumbnail, I put the most hated woman in America right over Courtney's head. That was an accident.
That was
Courtney's not the most hated woman in America.
And the invention of lying above my head.
I screwed up twice on that. Sorry.
You got a liar and a hated person.
Yeah.
Right here.
Whatever. So lastly, final movie.
Well, it's not really a movie. It's a series on Netflix.
Series. It also technically is a movie, I guess, but I haven't seen it.
There was one. It was called Bandersnatch, but
Black Mirror. To me, it's similar to Star Trek, where Star Trek really dealt with a lot of like technology and moral issues. And the reason that I included it in this for like atheism portrayed in movies is it really brings home this idea of morality, especially around new technology, is very complicated, and it's something that is worth debating, and that there isn't just an easy black and white answer to. And so that I think that's sort of the pinnacle of what atheism is about, is recognizing that life is very complicated, and it's not just like a just because I said so kind of version of morality.
Modern problems require modern solutions.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like my takeaway from most of the majority of the series was that it's like, so when technology and science kind of run very, very amok and kind of get way out of control, and some of the maladies that can form from those kinds of things happening.
Well, and it is, but I think it just brings up so many moral questions. I think one of my absolute favorite episodes of Black Mirror is season 3, episode 2, and it has so many moral questions. I think it's a
Which one is that one?
it's about, I don't want to give too much away, but it's about a kid who gets blackmailed by the internet.
Oh yeah. And then he gets told to go do all these certain things, and if he
Yeah.
doesn't, he'll give his parents or somebody on his social media like
This video,
these
yeah.
videos of him like jerking off or something like that. Yeah.
So it begins with him like in his room alone, and I think he does some other stuff before, but basically the beginning of the episode is him being blackmailed by an online anonymous source that records him masturbating on his computer camera. And the entire rest of the episode, he's doing all these things by text message instructions so that they don't release this video to his friends and family.
Yeah.
That's why I put tape over my mouth.
Right. But what's incredible about this show is the entire series really is it just shows the completely gray areas of these moral questions,
Yeah.
and that they're not simple. And so, I don't want to give too much away about the episode. It's one of my favorite episodes, but it's basically like a case study of Sam Harris's free will and Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape. Like, oh my gosh, it's so rich, it's so amazing. And
That's season 2?
Season 3, episode 2.
I haven't even
So
started that.
so
It's a good
another
series.
one of my favorite
Season
ones.
5 sucks, but
Season 3, episode 1, Nosedive, is amazing.
Oh,
It's
that's
just
a
all
good
about
one. Social media.
social
yeah.
media. It's amazing. But so the second one, it really it's one of those things that I don't want to give too much away, but there's so much.
No, there's gonna be spoilers here for people.
There's some things in the episode that really hit home with a lot of people's morality. Like, it really challenges your morality. And what's great is you spend most of the episode sympathizing with this character, and then once you find out this other thing about his circumstance, it really calls into question like what you would consider justified with this person. It's amazing. And I think it really, brings home not only that we are the victims of our genetics and our experience, but that that crime and punishment is a little more complicated than what our legal system does. So it's just, oh my gosh. But so anyway, so all this to say, Black Mirror.
Great series.
Yeah, the reason that I included it in this
I was disappointed with season 5, but
is that morality is complex, and this Christian narrative and other religions' narrative that morality is very black and white and simple is just absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
And I think it's a detriment to our humanity when we treat it that way as black and white.
yeah,
What I
because
like about the art, morality's not even involved.
Archer's amazing.
Archer is just fun.
What's Archer?
Archer is
It's an animated series.
animated on Netflix.
Oh, Archer!
cartoon.
Archer.
Yeah.
I know that, yeah.
Yeah.
And also one of my favorite animated adult comedies is
Do you want ants?
Big Mouth.
Because that's how you get ants.
I love
Is
it.
that yeah?
I'm gonna have to rewatch that movie. Big Mouth is one of my favorite shows. It's John Mulaney and Nick Kroll, and they come together to do this comedy about puberty, and it's the best. It's so much fun. It's a lot like Sausage Party, where they go way too far with the raunchiness, but it's also really, really fun.
Yeah.
That's the problem with a lot of movies that are both adult and too immature at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
South Park.
South Park,
Guy.
Family Guy, yeah. Sausage Party.
I like a good dick or fart joke, just like the next guy.
You guys ever see Tripping the Rift?
That's a skating movie back in the 80s, right?
No.
No.
That was a cartoon, an adult cartoon.
I think of Gleaming
in
the
90s.
Cube.
Gleaming the Cube.
Tripping the Rift. Why is that so familiar?
The lead character is I don't know, he's some horrible alien-looking thing, and his name is Chode.
For some reason, that
What?
really sticks in my mind.
And his
Well-
interest is a sex robot.
Jesus, I gotta go back and look at it.
With that,
I have finished my apple martini.
and since the apple teeny is done and gone, that
Thus, so are we.
brings us to the conclusion of this episode of At the Movies. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Once again, we'd like to encourage you guys to like the video,
Yeah, and
subscribe.
Stay tuned for the next one. I'm sure we'll do this again. There's so many
We will.
videos that we could talk about around the themes of atheism and morality and all these debates that we get into.
Thanks
So-
for watching.
Thank you.
See,
Can you grab my apple teeny, please?
for myself. Like a lady beverage.
I like a lady.
That sounds so dirty. Okay. Excuse me while I swoon, Chris. It's okay. Okay.
And you look. That looks perfect for this segment too, with drink in hand. We're at the movies.
Into the movie tavern or
Yeah.
Alamo Draft House
Alamo
is my
Draft
favorite
House,
place
yeah.
for